Hey everybody, welcome to an all-new episode of the movie Potluck. If you have been having a bad
Can
week,
anybody else hear this? I'm sorry. It's
I
all
can hear
like
you.
fuzzy.
I can hear you. Can
Okay,
you hear
so
me?
it's not just me.
No, I think you're good. Are you good?
I can't hear anybody. Let me hold on.
Okay, well, welcome to a movie
You're
Potluck while
frozen on my
Tori
screen.
works out her sound issues. We'll continue on. If you are not having a good week, I absolutely understand. It has again been just a crazy week all over the place, but we are here to entertain and give you something else to think about. Something even more terrible, which is possibly the end of the world or being trapped in a hotel with hundreds and hundreds of floors of burning inferno, possibly a volcano, maybe a tidal wave. I don't know. Whatever the end of world scenario that you want to come up with, we're going to talk about it tonight. I have a couple of huge, daunting questions to ask my panel. So without further ado, I am going to introduce for her awesome, let's just call it reunited tour, Betty. Betty, how are you?
Great. How are you?
We have missed you so much. We're so glad that you're back, but we are also really glad that we got to live vicariously through your TikToks and all of your Scotland adventures. We're really glad that you had a good time. At least it sounded
Thanks.
like you had a good time. Did you?
It was a lot of fun. Yeah. I can't wait to
Awesome.
go back.
No disasters? No major disasters?
Just flying there. I got stuck in airports. Like, I missed my plane because it was so crazy in the airport. The first day I had to fly the next day. They canceled my flight. Like, I got stuck in London, and on the way back, I got stuck in New York. It was a nightmare. Don't fly right now.
But your plane didn't fall out of the sky, and
No.
yeah, you're all good. So perfect. Okay,
Nope.
Awesome.
No natural disaster. We're good.
Or man-made ones. And
Okay.
Tori, how are you today?
Hello. I'm good.
Awesome.
This is,
No any natural disasters for you happening
I mean,
other than
is
technical
my mental
difficulties?
health like something that we can talk about? No, I'm just kidding. No, everything's peachy keen. No disasters to be had, I don't think. Yeah, I'm living pretty good right now.
Well, I actually live on the island or in an island chain of sort of natural disasters. I mean, we have regular tsunami warnings, we have hurricane warnings, we even have volcano warnings. So
Yeah.
lots and lots of fun times happening around here. However, I will say that nothing has ever risen to the level of a Hollywood disaster movie. Thank God.
Have you ever been in a volcano eruption?
I've seen one. I've seen one in the. I helicoptered there. I've been to Hawaii like 5 times, so we went on a helicopter.
But have you been in one, Jen?
In an actual active volcanic eruption?
Right.
I'm still here, so no. You don't generally tend to live through those things. On the Big Island, a couple years ago. On the Big Island a couple years ago, Kilauea, which is their volcano, the volcano for the Hawaii, had a massive eruption. Well, massive meaning big for the island, and it actually gave Hawaii quite a bit more land. I mean, right now it's all black lava rock, but still it increased the size of the island. So for weeks and weeks and weeks, there was this heavy volcanic haze in the air, and it was kind of like breathing in smog if you've been in LA, or like a bad smog. So people were dealing with that. The people that lived on the Big Island, a lot of people lost their homes. It was definitely a major event. If you look back 2-3 years, you'll see footage of people who basically just watched their houses go up in flames as the impending lava comes to claim it. It's a crazy, crazy experience. But no, I don't live on that island. Our volcano is technically dormant. I don't actually think it's ever going to erupt again, but who knows? Never know. We're not even on the side of the
I wasn't sure if they had like mini eruptions that you would live through.
No, not on this island. Probably not. We live on Maui. We do have tons of earthquakes over here, though, that end up happening because the volcano over on Hawaii ends up. Yeah, it's not so fun. Not so fun.
Oh, somebody
Uh,
said I was on the outskirts of a volcano. Is that Josh?
that it is definitely an experience. Although, okay, so let's shoot right into this because this actually is a perfect segue. So the biggest natural disaster that I can think of that I ever lived through was a hurricane that really kind of scared me a lot. Heavy waves, and we were living on the coast. Things were like flying all over the place. We all thought that maybe the roof would go. It was that scary. Um, and we made it through and it was okay. The other island that got hit was not so lucky. But that's the one that like I remember the deepest. What are do you so without mentioning any movies, tell me what is the biggest disaster that you've ever lived through, and then let's see if we can find a movie to correlate. Go ahead,
Go
Tori.
ahead, Bet.
Tell me.
Well,
Oh, okay.
Oh, go ahead, Betty.
I'm from Florida, so
Have you
there
ever
are a
lived
lot of hurricanes.
a lot of hurricanes?
Yeah, like
Okay.
that's pretty much
Wow.
it. There's a lot of hurricanes.
What about you, Tori?
Hmm. Okay, so there was like this mini twister that like touched down in our yard and like destroyed this planter that we had.
Hmm.
And but it didn't touch the house and we didn't really even think
Oh
about
my
it.
god.
We didn't even really know about it, but then we heard it.
Oh, that's crazy.
Yeah, so that was
So
probably
the
the
Wizard of Oz.
yes, yes. I think somebody went to Oz that night. um no, yeah, I think that's probably and I mean I went through a hurricane and blizzards too. I've been through two blizzards,
Oh
so
yeah, we always forget about how big blizzards are. Well, until you watch The Day After Tomorrow, which then you start to go, "Oh yeah, those blizzards, darn." Um
you put Josh on there.
so, okay. So that actually my producer Josh just put up a great card. Been through a couple hurricanes, drove the 7 Mile Bridge in the middle of a tropical storm, earthquakes, volcanoes, tornadoes. If I get zombie apocalypse, I hit the bingo on my disaster card. Okay, so this brings up a really good point. Um, over the past couple of years, and I would say like the past decade, so maybe not couple years, but over the past decade, we have definitely shifted our disaster movie idea to something more what I would call post-apocalyptic or on the verge of the apocalypse. And we've moved away from telling stories that are the Towering Inferno or Watership Down or Dante's Peak or things like that. And the reason that I think that we have moved away from those movies is because we've gotten really good at handling disasters by and large, right? We have FEMA, we have not just FEMA, but we have like a really dedicated response team to handling our disasters. So the human drama and the human toll is still big, but it's really hard to make a huge movie out of it that has super high stakes. Okay, so what we've done is we've sort of moved our disaster movies either A, out into space, or B, we have made them, like I said, pre or post apocalyptic. And my question to you guys is how do you guys feel about this? Do you think that our pre and post apocalyptic movies do a good job of sort of like preparing us for what we think might happen? I find that a lot of the, especially the post-apocalyptic movies, it's like they're all cautionary tales, right? And they all kind of give us little bits and pieces of information about what we may or may not need to do if there really is some kind of major disaster. But we have started to focus, I think, a little bit more on the actual causes of the disaster and less on what the human toll of the disaster is. And I just wanted to get you guys to kind of weigh in on that. What do you think? I mean, if we think about it, even Resident Evil is a kind of disaster movie
Right.
because it's the release of of the virus everywhere. And I guess without me weighing in, just tell me what do you guys think?
Go ahead, Betty. I'm still thinking.
Well, I think it's interesting because there's a thing going around. Everyone's going, movies taught us to believe that quicksand would be a lot more dangerous than it really is.
Yeah.
In the 80s and 90s, did they not know
Yeah.
how it worked? Well,
Yeah.
I think people aren't afraid of that anymore. So they're like, well, let's step up our game. Let's
Yeah.
do
It's
something that might really happen.
it's interesting because I think the the idea behind certain tropes obviously has changed a lot. If I were to look back into the 80s, the number of times that I saw people getting bit by snakes and
Yes.
then like dying, or some
The
dramatic thing happening,
antidote.
it was, yes, it was such a huge thing. And now it's like, a snake? What?
Yeah.
There's a snake here? Like, it's just not a thing anymore. Um, but if you could count even on both of your hands the number of apocalypse movies that deal with a zombie or some other kind of virus outbreak, oh my god, it's everywhere. Why?
Mhm.
And I think the reason sort of behind that is, again, what I was just talking about, which is this whole idea behind we're moving from, hey, you know what, we actually are the cause of all these disasters. It's not really that the disasters happen to us, it's that we cause the disasters, right? What do
Right.
you think, Tori?
Yeah. I think that people want to blame people more than they want to blame natural disasters. It's more sinister coming from another human being, right? Which makes it all the more part of a disaster movie, you know? So,
Yeah, yeah. I think I totally think you're right, but I also think that that okay, so we know that at the center of most of our disaster movies, let's just throw a couple out there. Um, One of the classic disaster movies is this movie called Towering Inferno,
oh,
which is
yeah.
basically a skyscraper that catches on fire. And of course, we would never tell that story today. Why wouldn't we tell that story today? Because we have 9/11.
Yeah.
And
It'd
we
be in
just
bad
wouldn't,
taste.
yep, we would not tell that story again today. We also probably wouldn't tell a story of someone flying an airplane into whatever, because we have recent memory of 9/11. Um, but then if you factor in movies like did you see the movie uh what was the name of the movie that had the we just talked about it, oh, the Dante's Peak? Did you see
Hmm.
Dante's Peak?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so
We just watched it recently. It was like a couple of months ago.
it's such a goofy but quirky fun
Yes, it's
movie.
a corny movie, but
It
I
really
love
is.
it. And like
My
the lava and the
the
dust.
acid lake,
Yeah,
and
acid
yeah, the
lake.
acid lake is one that always gets me. Um,
That
the
was great.
the 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 reason that I think that like those movies have sort of gone out of style is because, once again, we are so out of touch with those kinds of elemental factors that we don't really pay too much attention to them. Or that we think that, like, well, those are removed, those aren't things that we have to deal with, right?
Right.
And
It's easy to like put things in a category. Like it's easy to
yeah,
compartmentalize this kind of stuff. Like this will never happen. We'll
yeah,
never get eaten by dinosaurs. Never
yep,
think that. Like
yep.
you had to be prepared for anything. Like
So and so that actually is what I was thinking of when I was saying that, from the apocalypse standpoint, right? These are kind of like little mini apocalypses, right? They're just
Mhm.
like, okay, well, here's this person's personal version of the apocalypse.
Yeah.
But then when we move out to something wider, it's almost always man-made. We've done
Yeah.
it. This is our fault. Which in a way I kind of love, because it's kind of like, hey everybody, pay attention. What the heck are we doing? But also it deals with this common theme of hubris. And so if I go back to the natural disaster movies, there's always these elements of hubris involved, right? Even Titanic, which
Oh yeah.
is, oh, this is an unsinkable ship. Nothing's ever going to sink it, blah blah blah. All right.
Meet
So
ship meet iceberg.
yeah, right? Like, oh, nothing is ever gonna happen. And even the captain is like, so yeah, whatever kind of feel.
Speed up the boat.
It's sort of shocking. Yeah,
Yeah.
right, right. Um, so okay, so I was thinking as I was preparing my notes for this podcast, I was thinking about how many times we have sort of packaged disaster movies with monsters. Because a lot of times, if you watch old Godzilla movies, man, they are about as disastrous as you could possibly get, right? Um,
Mothra.
yes, and even the King Kong version of the monster, they bring the monster to New York City, and what does he do? He immediately scales the Empire State Building and
Yeah.
tries to, you know. I think that those movies are actually so underappreciated as actual disaster movies. But I wanted to get your opinion on something. When somebody says disaster movie, do you actually ever think about monsters, or do you think of disaster movies as being something a little bit more unpredictable, like not controlled by any kind of sentience?
I think like for me, animals and beasts come to mind as natural disasters just because they're um it's interesting to think that we live in a world where we might not be the top carnivore, might not be the top predator, you know? There's a great movie, crap. I'm gonna have to look it up, but it's really good. It's about two wild lions.
Oh yeah, the ones that are in India that are the man
The
eaters.
ghost in the shadow, I think.
Yeah, that's a
Yeah.
great movie.
Yeah, and
Yep.
I think that's a disaster movie. I always thought that was a disaster movie because
So
they destroyed that tribe. Like that was crazy.
so before I move into my next question, Betty, what do you think?
I think she froze.
Oh no, not again. Betty's having difficulty with internet. So sorry. Okay. Okay. I'm gonna rephrase this slightly. Um, if the impending or ongoing disaster is the major plot device of a movie, then my question is, how do we differentiate, or how do we classify a movie that is like Godzilla as not a disaster movie, as okay, well, this is not primarily a disaster movie, it's actually just a monster movie. I sometimes kind of wonder about that myself. um and the reason that I often wonder about that is because I sometimes I think that we overemphasize
Mhm.
the parts of movies that aren't the disaster part, but they
Mhm.
should be, right?
Yeah.
Remember what I was saying about Resident Evil?
Mhm.
Man, there is so much death and destruction in Resident Evil, and it doesn't just take out Raccoon City, but it expands beyond Raccoon City, and
Yeah.
it right, it truly becomes very disastrous very quickly. But then we have movies like uh 30 Days of Night,
Mhm.
and it's disastrous for their little town, but is it actually a disaster movie? I kind of think no, right? Because even though there's lots of death and lots of carnage and lots of things going on and things blowing up and the town is, yes, there's lots of bad things happen. Does it actually qualify it as a disaster movie? I kind of think no. So
You think it's more
what
like
do you think?
an action thriller movie?
Yeah, right. It feels much more like an action horror movie to me than
Okay,
an actual
yeah.
disaster movie.
I always kind of thought it was a horror movie. Like I kind of got that vibe from it. But I was thinking, damn, what was I just thinking? It was a great movie. come back. I'll come back to that. It'll come back to me. Um,
But
go ahead.
well, I was going to say, but one of the hallmarks of a disaster movie is there are generally these small units, either of families or specialized groups, that use survival tactics or tricks that they come up with either on the spot or because of their specific training, and that's what gets them through, right? And so that
Right.
has always kind of been like, okay, well, maybe we can't get through here, but we'll MacGyver something, and then that becomes that character's sort of plot twist that got them through from point A to point B. Um, and I I at this point now I am kind of struggling myself with what makes a good disaster movie at all, because are we just sort of like under or over generalizing our disaster movies? Die Hard, by this sort of metric, feels like it would probably be a disaster movie. I
Yeah.
mean,
So
what do you think?
I think a lot of it is impending doom on Earth, like
Mm.
to the Earth. Like Earth is going to blow up, or it's going to get taken over, or there's going to be a meteor. You know, tons of
Oh,
stuff like that.
yeah.
So like,
That's actually a good point.
yeah,
I feel like you might actually be right.
yeah. I think that's what a disaster movie is, and we're trying to save Earth, or like maybe like there could be like shoots off of this, for different movies. That's just the big bubble, whenever you're making a little web of
Well,
stuff,
the other thing
brainstorming.
the other thing that also sort of to me feels like the hallmark of a good disaster movie is there's generally not a there's generally not a perception of the disaster itself is evil, right? The
Yeah.
disaster itself is generally benign. So, with Godzilla as an example, Godzilla is not benign. He's not necessarily evil, but he's not benign. He has an
Right.
agenda, right?
Yeah.
A volcano,
Destroy.
however, a volcano is completely benign. It does not have an agenda. It isn't, it's not out to flatten the earth because we have been bad people or whatever. It's just that's what happens. Um, I mean, unless you are here in Hawaii and Pele is whatever. Anyway,
Yeah, I love
um,
Pele. Go
the
ahead.
the idea I think behind most disaster movies is that there is a benign event that happens, even the iceberg in Titanic, which is benign, right? But it happens, and then it's the response to whatever it is that has happened.
Yeah. And
What do you think, Josh? Oh, I'm
oh,
sorry. Go ahead, Tori.
what I think about that though is like they always, always, always put somebody in there that has some sort of training.
Mm,
Like, like somebody that is from the military or has some survival training or some
right.
sort of extreme like athlete or something. Like they have some sort of going on so they know what to do in situations like that. Or maybe it's just good leadership.
Right, that was the piece that I was saying about having the small tactical units,
Yeah.
right? Usually it's the small tactical units that end up being like a family or a group of ragtag survivors, and they're just like all banding together to try to figure out what to do next and that kind of thing. Most disaster movies they don't count on just one person as being sort of like, okay, well, this is man against wild, because then that's not really a disaster movie.
Right.
You know what
Right.
I mean? But I really would like to know what you think, Josh. What do you think about the whole idea behind the disaster being the benign event, and that's sort of what classifies it as the disaster?
Well, I think when it comes to disaster movies, it's really difficult to have not necessarily man-made things fall under that category because there are airport things happen, right?
Hmm.
But I do think it does have to fall under either like you said, a natural disaster, or if it is somehow man-made, then it's got to be accidental, right? Pretty much. As long as there's not a villain other than the disaster.
Well, okay, or you could look at this like there can be villainous factions that thwart our survivors' ability to move forward in the disaster.
Mm-hmm.
But it's the disaster that has to stay benign. So if the disaster has sentience, or if the disaster is, like, as an example, Terminator does not feel like a disaster movie because Skynet is not benign. We know what causes that to happen. And so, yes, there is carnage, and it is very post-apocalyptic, and it feels very crazy, but it doesn't feel like it's a disaster movie. It just feels like, okay, well, this is there's just a huge, I think there's a huge mark between the two. I don't know, what do you think, Betty?
Is it because you can actually control a large corporation, and you can't really control something like a tornado?
Yeah, I think the idea of disaster is generally, even if the disaster is, okay, so as an example, what was that movie called? The Day After Tomorrow. Where it's really is caused by us, right? It's global warming that causes, but it feels like a disaster movie because we're not in control of the weather. And yes, we caused all of the storms and all of the, super cooling that happens, but is it actually in our control at that point? No. So it becomes benign again, and it sort of puts us back into, okay, now it's just us against nature, not us against an actual villain, which is one of the reasons that I would hesitate to actually classify Resident Evil as a disaster movie, because the Umbrella Corporation is evil and they're not benign. So when they release the T-cell virus, it's not like there is some kind of mechanism for us to look at this and go, oh yeah, but now that it's out, now it's just man against, because it never is. It's always still, excuse me, the Umbrella Corporation as being the cause, right? Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Okay. So along those very same lines, let's move into outer space real quick. There's been so many, I don't know, hit and miss movies about disasters in space. And I gotta say, I don't find them very compelling, probably because I've never been to space, and so I can't really objectively understand what people are experiencing. Even when they sort of do a good job of explaining isolation and creating a sense of urgency, it's a lot harder for me than if it's like, okay, well, you're stuck in the middle of the ocean and there's sharks swimming around or whatever. But I wanted to get the opinion from you guys about whether you thought that the move to space movies in terms of making disaster movies was something that feels like, does it give you more to work with, or do you feel like it isolates us even more? I guess when I say that, I'm thinking, does the disaster movie itself lose anything by being in space, or does it feel exactly the same?
It feels worse to me because
Mhm.
because being in space, like gravity, I had so much anxiety watching Sandra Bullock try to get out of there, because at least with say you're stranded in the middle of the ocean, you might eventually hit land. If you're in space, you're going to float off into nowhere.
Right.
There's nobody that can come save you.
Right.
And that is terrifying to me.
I disagree.
Yeah? What do you think?
Because if you're floating around in space, there's still a chance you're going to hit land.
It just might not be the land that you want to hit.
So basically, you'll probably die because you'll hit Earth.
Yeah, you'll be hitting it much faster than you would if you're in the ocean, but
So you agree that it's worse than like?
Yeah, I get what you're saying. I was going for a joke here. But yeah, in space, there's nowhere to go.
The whole adage of "in space no one can hear you scream" always terrified me as a kid. I hated that because I hated even thinking about it. Like, of course, because there is just this epic isolation.
And then
Yeah.
what if
Um,
something happens to your gear?
yeah,
What if you run
yeah,
out of food?
Oh,
yeah.
and
I
then you have
mean
to
that.
make potatoes, like
That yeah,
like in The
right.
Martian.
Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry to keep clearing my throat. Um,
No worries.
I I also think that just from the standpoint of sort of where we've come with disaster movies, and we have definitely turned a bit of a corner on this. The stakes are so much higher for everything, right? So now when we have a disaster movie, I don't know if did you guys ever see the movie called Congo?
I read the book too.
So
It's
that's
written by Michael Crichton.
Yeah.
right. So that's a good one. Because doesn't that one feel like it is like the stakes are super high in that movie?
Yeah, it gives the same high, like disaster high, like what are they gonna do? Like that kind of thing.
Yeah, right. And then if you watch there's another movie out there which I'm guessing you guys probably haven't seen and don't know anything about, but it's well worth both watching and reading. Reading first and watching any adaptation is great. It's called The Andromeda Strain.
Yes.
Yes,
Oh
you know that
God.
one?
Oh,
Yes,
Michael
I
Oh,
read
Crichton.
it as a bit. I read it
sweet.
as a girl too. Yeah, it was a great book.
Okay, so The Andromeda Strain is what I would consider to be sort of quintessential in disaster, because it is both incredibly benign in its origins, so to speak, but it has really serious implications. And everything that happens around it is sort of like it has a cascading effect. So each little event ends up standing on the shoulders of the last event, and the stakes become higher and higher and higher. And I see this a lot in older disaster movies like the Avalanche movie, like the Towering Inferno, even in Titanic. You're building toward a fever pitch. In
Independence Day.
Independence Day,
Yeah.
yes, even that is total. Although definitely are not benign. I mean, let's face it; those creatures are definitely out for. They want our
They wanted,
planet.
yeah, they wanted to kill us all.
I think that actually, I'll ask you guys. What do you think is the best kind of disaster to really express other than the space one which we just talked about, to really express how ill-equipped we usually are to survive all of the natural elements? Because I have some ideas, and then I have some ideas about really unique ones that are like super cool, but we just never think about them. What do you think,
I
Tori?
I think like volcano movies and fire movies, anything with like hot stuff.
Mm,
We don't know what to do. Like the firemen can only do so much. Even with air support, it's really hard to get a wildfire out.
yeah, that's true.
Like I can't imagine what it would be like to try to get lava. I mean, I've seen people stand out on their little porches with a hose to try to get the lava to stop coming on their land.
Oh yeah,
But
that's not gonna work.
yeah, that's not gonna work, buddy. But I think that's like quintessential.
What do you
Uh,
think, Betty?
yeah.
What's your
You know,
what do you think?
I think maybe like Twister tornadoes, like Twister, because if you think about it, even in Twister, they're just working around the tornadoes or the twisters.
Right.
They're even talking about how they can't control it, and they happen so quickly. So
Right.
if it's like
Did you
something
say
like a
Twister?
hurricane, yeah. So if it's like a hurricane,
Uh,
exactly. If it's like a hurricane, you can evacuate. With a
That's
Twister, you can't really get out in time.
although I will mention that one of, I think, my least favorite disaster ideas, because I realize how incredibly difficult it is to understand them and get evacuated, is the tsunami disaster
oh
movies.
yeah.
Because tsunamis are not, we are in movies, we're often almost pre-programmed to think of a tsunami as a big wave, right? But like
Yeah.
a big wave, like as if the wave is going to curl over the land and it's going to be like 8,000 feet high or something. And that's not how it happens, right? A tsunami is more like an inward surge of water that just generally destroys everything. And it is terrifying, especially when you live
Mhm.
on an island. But it's terrifying in the sense that there is no way to stop it. There is
Right.
nothing that you can do.
And once
There's
you're in
no,
it, yeah, you're
right,
gone.
there's no firefighters that are going to come and stop the tsunami. There's no, it's just not going to happen. Um, but having said that, and because I actually want to ask Josh the same question, having said that, I will say that I think sometimes the things that we understand the least are the things that scare us the most, and that's why they make such good disaster movies,
Yeah.
Like
right?
this.
So, Josh, what do you think? What kind of disaster movie? Um, what do you think is the scariest kind of disaster movie?
The scariest kind of disaster movie. I will say some of my, I guess, favorites, at least more anxiety ridden movies, had to do with giant rocks falling from space.
Ooh,
Mm.
That's right, the asteroid movies. We're
Armageddon.
talking Armageddon. We're talking Deep Impact.
Armageddon.
We're
Yes. Deep
talking
impact.
Seeking a Friend for the End of the World,
uh huh.
Greenland.
Good point. That's
Those
good.
things. Oh man, because for the most part, there's really nothing you can do.
Nope.
No.
Is it cool to think that
Absolutely
there's
nothing.
an oil rig team out there that's going to save the day just for the sake of not paying taxes anymore? Sure, it's a comforting thought.
Honestly, I feel like at least in a situation like that, you can go down comfortable because you can just
On
party. You can do
fire,
well. You wouldn't feel it. You could literally do whatever you wanted to be like. You know what? The world's about to end. I'll just do whatever I want to do. Smoke a little, and then once it hits, it hits. You have no idea it happened.
here's
So
just
okay, just not to give anybody any anxiety, and if you need to, quickly take a deep breath, just take a deep breath. But I recently saw a really good article written by a former NASA astrophysicist who said we love basically to give ourselves false senses of security by thinking that we could predict when an asteroid is going to come into purview and we would have lots of time to prepare. And he said really the truth is we would probably have maybe at the outset a couple of days, because once an asteroid is actually, once we identify that it is, because we're talking about hundreds of thousands of miles in the arc of uncertainty, sort of, right? So when they say that we've had a lot of near misses, I mean, we're talking huge arcs, right? Because in the cosmic scale, that's what matters. But when you think about it, all those near misses by a couple 100,000 miles could have been us. Like, that's how. And I'll say one other thing about disaster movies that always freak me out. It always freaks me out when the classic archaeologist comes into the scene and says, "Do you see this crater? Do you see this giant hole in the earth? Yep, this was caused by an asteroid and it probably gave us a, uh, an unforced winter, or
That
because
remember that doc. I don't know if anybody else did. I'm a kind of a dork, but there was a documentary on the History Channel, and it was called "The Year Without a Summer,"
yeah,
and
right.
it was because of a volcano in the middle of the Atlantic.
So now whenever I see a movie and there's the classic person narrating for us how many times the earth has been hit by an asteroid, and I'm thinking that, well, gosh, this is definitely possible in my lifetime, that's actually pretty terrifying. And
Yeah.
especially because I don't know, this is actually an awesome trope in disaster movies, which I love. But I love it when they wrestle with the idea of, should we tell the public or shouldn't we tell the public?
They probably wouldn't.
Because yes, because I mean, what do you guys think? Okay, let me start with Josh first. Josh, tell me what you think about the whole trope of, should we tell or shouldn't we tell, and what's your opinion? Should we tell? Shouldn't we tell?
Oh gosh. Um, First of all, I don't think that we would be told until it became very, very obvious.
If it's truly the end of the world, right? Because like we do have tsunami evacuations and fire evacuations and volcano evacuation. I mean, like we do have those things. But if something was truly world ending, do you think we would know about it?
I don't think we would know. It would be kept secret for as long as possible, I think.
Yeah. Yep.
And then that way, one, the masses could, you know, keep everything going normally for as long as possible. Supply chains can keep moving. I mean, we already saw what happened when supply chains stop. So
Yeah.
they're going to want to keep that moving, and not because of us necessarily, but at some point there will be a plan, and I guarantee you there is a plan in place from people that have enough authority, power, if you want to call it that. There is a contingency plan to make sure everybody that they want to survive survives. And a couple of movies have actually talked about this in a pretty somewhat detailed fashion. Greenland, which I keep recommending, comes to mind.
Deep Impact was another one.
American
Isn't that
Horror
the
Story.
and what was the one where they had the arc? The actual
all?
arc.
2012.
2012, yeah. Where they actually had like, okay, well, here's all the smart people. We need to get these people on board. We need to get, yeah. That it feels very minimizing. To me, it feels very minimizing. Just because I'm pretty sure that, yeah, my particular skill sets aren't actually going to be called upon to fuel the rest of the world. Yeah.
Hmm.
Although, if anybody's listening right now and they are absolutely sure that they need a really good website for the end of the world, listen, I'm available. So I'm your girl. I'll be right there.
I mean, they're going to need a website underground. Like everyone's going to need to stay updated.
Also, I do write a pretty mean fiction, so if you want to be entertained for the end of the world, I am also totally your girl.
Yeah.
I got a few check boxes covered myself, and not to get too personal, but I can write, I can host, I have a CDL, I know how to cook.
We're all
when it
advocating
comes
for our
to-
place in
I know
this
it's-
fictional arc.
I'm situational funny, and I'm even funnier when I'm stressed and bad things are happening because of I want to lighten the situation. So I think I'm valuable if at the end of the world.
I am valuable. I can
Bring
fish.
weed.
Yes, I can grow weed. I can grow vegetables too. I can sew. I can hunt. I haven't hunted in
Everything's
a
going to
very
be
long
wiped
time.
out. There's not going to be anything left to hunt.
I'm gonna
Ugh,
die.
I know. That's sad.
But
They're just gonna let me die.
I think one of my most important attributes that I bring to the table is for the purposes of repopulation. My standards are low.
Oh, see, that could actually be an important part. But however, you will share the stage with every other nerdy guy out there ever.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
have a
I feel
feeling-
like
I have
this
a
is a good
feeling-
place to bring Kinte in and say,
Yes.
Kinte, give us your.
I have a
Give
feeling
us
the
your
people that they're
spiel.
going to want to like repopulate the earth are going to be like supermodels and like the female supermodels and like male scientists.
Are you sure you
Oh,
haven't
good
seen
Lord.
Don't Look Up?
Because
I hope not.
that's
That's
good
very sad.
theory. That's good theory. I like it.
It's already been proven that I breed geniuses. So
I
but they need
I
the
think
geniuses. They don't need you. So they'll just take the kids.
but using me would help create more.
that was the whole 2012 thing, right? The families weren't invited and the kids basically were, because the kids they showed a kind of aptitude, and that's what they thought that they were going to need.
Watch
I-
Greenland.
I find the idea of the disaster movie very interesting in that way as well, which I'm going to ask you guys about too. The whole idea behind usually the disaster movie is to survive, right? And along the way, there is always these sort of morally heavy choices, filled with a kind of ambiguity that is sometimes very difficult to understand. And we see it a lot in man against nature movies. I don't. Did you guys see the movie The Gray with Liam Neeson in it?
No.
So
I know
there's-
what you're talking about though. It's when he tapes the glass to his hands and
it's a movie about basically that they're in a plane crash. So disaster one is right there, right? And then they're after the plane crash, these group of guys are trying to survive and trek out of the wilderness, and they're hunted by a pack of wolves. And the
geez.
pack of wolves that they are hunted by are particularly vicious and really, really, I don't know whether I would call it like a supernatural. I don't know, but whatever it is, they are hunting them. And Liam Neeson is basically the only one to survive. And the way that it happens is not necessarily like they give up on each other. It's that along the way, each one sort of succumbs to either their own recklessness or their own inability to understand and read the cues of the environment, or in the end, one gives himself up for everybody else. And so
What
I
about
just
the
kind of
movie
wanted to
Bird
talk a little bit.
Yeah.
What's that?
Is it Bird Box, the one with Sandra Bullock?
Yes.
That's a good one where like people just died out of their own stupidity, and then she had to like go blind. That was crazy. That movie was crazy.
spoilers. I haven't seen it.
The question to you guys is, how do you feel about that kind of moral ambiguity? Because typically, in almost every disaster movie I've ever seen, people always end up either being left behind because they're too slow, or because they're not bringing enough to the group, and we can't expend all these resources on you because then we all won't survive, or people become collateral damage while the rest of the group can move on. And what do you guys think about that? How do you guys feel about those particular types of movies? Any ideas?
Well, I like moral ambiguity and I like flawed characters, because if the person isn't flawed, there's no growth.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's pretty accurate. I think also that when you don't want to do like what a lot of horror movies did and have the same system. Do you know what I mean? Like Scream kind of broke out like the rules of the horror movies, and there are rules. And it's kind of like the same with the disaster movies. There are like rules to different disaster movies. Does that make sense?
I think so.
It kind of works because they're telling you we're breaking these rules.
Yeah.
So the difference, and I'm just quick plug. I'm really excited for our sort of next season piece about TV, because we're going to talk a lot about tropes. But we see sort of the standard recurring tropes happening in disaster movies a lot. And that particular one is the one that I find sort of the most offensive. And I'll tell you why. Um, the idea that if we all have to somehow make the choices about who gets to live and who gets to die, we oftentimes set the stage in movies, especially in these like fictive little neatly spaced kind of ideas, that whoever the person is that is going to get left behind had some kind of character flaw. And I hate that, because the
Mhm.
trope is fine if the survival of everyone depends on one person being left behind. Then okay, then that totally makes a disaster movie sense, right? Or makes disaster movie sense. But what doesn't make sense is when we assign the flaw, like it's the fat guy that gets left behind, or it's the
Sorry, Josh.
one or it's the lady that was like the most annoying or whatever. Those things actually bug me, because it's not about getting left behind. It's about having the character flaw, and then that that judgment is passed on you, right? Do you know what I
It's the
mean?
same thing as the black guys always getting killed first in horror movies. That's what
Right.
I was. That's what I was trying to
Well,
say.
I mean,
Like,
that's not true. It's all black people.
yeah, that's true.
And sorry,
That's
Betty,
true.
but also all the gay people as well. So
It's true.
That
yes.
is true.
Yeah,
Unfortunately.
we already
So
know that
I'm
it's a
definitely
written
gonna die. Yeah,
it's a
they're gonna
written
throw me off. They're
rule.
gonna be like, "Oh, you're a lesbian. You're not
But
gonna
yeah,
It,
repopulate us."
it's always
it
the fat people. It's always the people that go against the leader. So,
yes.
or get
Yes.
in fights with the leader.
Or just
Um,
But
even a
you know
little bit
what?
annoying.
yeah,
But part of that makes sense because if you think about it, at the end of the world, like we're always taught that teamwork is what's going to get us to our main goal, right? So if
yeah.
somebody is going against the group or not cohesive with the group, they're going to be weaker.
The group would be weaker because there is the flaw, because there's the
Right.
and I get that part I'm totally down with, right? If you are actively working against the group or are not working with the group even, then yes, then I totally get that. What I object to strongly is the trope of there has to be a character flaw in order for you to be left behind. So either you are, like we were just talking about, black, gay, uh you have some kind of um offensive trait, like you're overweight or you are too short or you are whatever. They're arbitrary characteristics that don't actually usually play into the plot, other than to be just sort of a little hook to say, haha, see, this person got left behind because they were too fat, or haha, this person got left behind because they didn't have the right skin color, or whatever. Those things, they matter. They totally matter, because we keep seeing them over and over and over and over again. That to me is not good. And that doesn't even make a good disaster movie,
Well, that's
because
because like they don't want to kill off their favorite characters. So unless you're Stephen King, kill off your darlings,
right.
they probably become attached to these characters and don't want to do what needs to be done.
Which is honestly, see, that's why disaster movies turn the trope on its head sometimes, because like in a horror movie, as just a quick um comparison, in a horror movie there is a sense of justice. By the end, the whoever it was that was the bully, whoever it was that had like the really significant character flaw, as in they were mean, or not even mean, but they just didn't get it. They didn't listen. They actively worked against whatever was happening. Those people are the ones who get punished. Now, I mean, there's huge tropes in there too, but by and large, there's this sense of justice. In disaster movies, it's
Which
not
is
like
why
that.
they probably kill the people who lose their virginity off. Like
Yeah,
anyone who's
right.
got
If you have sex, then that's
you're
actually a
not pure
problem.
anymore. Bye.
Yep, yep.
Yeah.
But in disaster movies, it's exactly the opposite. In disaster movies, it doesn't matter whether your flaw is something that feels like, well, I guess I should say it this way: the flaws that you have are arbitrary to the group. What matters is whether or not those flaws will end up simply making you the one that gets left behind because you had the character trait, not necessarily because there's any justice behind it. It's more like the trait itself becomes toxic to the group in their effort to survive, and that's not real. It's very imposed by the fiction. I can think of a whole bunch of these, but the one that comes to mind is uh oh god, now I just totally forgot the name of the movie with the ship that turns upside down, Poseidon Adventure. The In the Poseidon Adventure, all the people that die in the Poseidon Adventure are basically the people that we in the very beginning get all these little cues about. No, you shouldn't root for this person. Nope, don't root for that person, because they will ultimately be the ones that are going to get killed. And the only people that we have any stake in surviving are the people that we are told through the fiction are the perfect people. And I hate that.
And,
Why?
and as someone who's
Bleh.
been to war, I can guarantee that the assholes are the ones who are going to survive, because they will literally take them down to like live.
So there. See, there you go. I guess. Well, I'll ask you guys. What do you think about? What do you think generally, other than trying to say, okay, this is survival of the fittest? What do you think is the actual message behind disaster movies? Is it, hey, you know what, we're too dumb? Or is it, oh no, hey, we are so smart that we can overcome anything? I mean, I know that those aren't the only two choices, but what do you guys think is the main message of a disaster movie?
I think it's the human spirit can overcome anything, not that we're too smart.
Okay. What do you think, Tori?
Well, I agree with Betty. I agree with her, but reword the question, because I want to make sure that I am going to answer this correctly.
What do you think is the main message of disaster movies? What's the main message we're supposed to walk away from a disaster movie with?
I think it's a little bit of, okay, we have wisdom and experience, and we can get through stuff because we have gone to epic extremes. And then I also think that, we're dumb. We don't know what we're doing, if this is really going to happen. We have a lot of things to work on.
Sometimes it's dumb luck.
Yeah,
dumb luck. Yeah.
Society. Like we have the money and the funding to put towards preventing death in disasters. I think a lot of money that's wasted in the government could be put to use in stuff like that. But that's just my opinion. But like, exactly. That's what I'm.
Well, I don't know about you, but I just lived through 2.5+ years with coronavirus, and let me tell you, yeah, we are clearly not ready for whatever the next big disaster is.
No, we're not.
This one, which is just basically a virus, created such division with people, and created, like, it made a whole political class. Like, that to me is like, can you imagine if and I mean, I know that this has been satirized, but can you imagine if there's a meteor coming toward Earth and we politicize the meteor? Okay, well, the meteor is clearly here just to wipe out the and then whatever.
That's
like
the
what?
agenda. That's the agenda.
It's so crazy. Yeah,
That's why
exactly.
That's why I don't think they would tell anybody like that anything was going to happen, because everyone would panic. They would turn against each other. I think they'd just let us die, and they will.
I mean, I hate to say
they
it,
will
but
pull out the
right.
Yeah, they'll pull out the few people that they have planned.
Yeah.
We'll know.
Yeah, I think that's going to be the end of the world type shit. Yeah.
What's your opinion, Josh? What do you think is the main message of the disaster movie? Is it survival of the fittest, or is it just, hey, with a little bit of luck, we can get things through?
Well, I don't think it's ever survival of the fittest, because it's not always the it's barely ever the fittest that actually survive. It's
Except Liam Neeson's The Gray, in which case, yeah, it really is. But yeah, go ahead.
I think the first lesson from disaster movies is listen to the scientists.
Mm-hmm.
They're warning you for a reason. And if you don't, bad things generally tend to follow.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
2 is stick together. And I don't just mean in your ragtag group of survivors. I mean, as humans, we need to look out for one another. Because, well, an earthquake, a fire, tornado, or anything. None of that. It doesn't matter what the disaster is. The disaster isn't looking out for your best interests.
Right.
And
Which,
if we don't stick together, we're just helping each other die quicker.
right, which sort of harkens back to what I was saying before about what makes a good disaster movie, and that is that the disaster is benign. It does not care about our general welfare, either good or bad, and it doesn't care whether we are flawed as characters, good or
Mm-mm.
bad. It doesn't make any difference. But generally, a disaster movie relies on the interaction between humans as their little tactical survival unit, and they're the people that make the choices, oftentimes stupid, about whether or not a particular person should survive or shouldn't survive, or whether they get resources or don't get resources. Those things, that's where I think disaster movies sometimes fall short. It's just in that one sort of arena. As a kind of closing question, are there any disaster movies that you have never seen put into film that you want to see put into film? Listen, I just while you guys think about this question, right after coronavirus basically shut everything down, I was on Twitter and noticed a massive amount of producers and directors asking screenwriters to please stop pitching them end of the world coronavirus movies because they were just absolutely inundated by them. So obviously current events they play a huge part in what disaster movies come, but what do you guys think? What disaster movies would you like to see? Let's start with you, Josh.
A disaster movie I would like to see
That hasn't been done already.
that hasn't been done already.
Yes.
Wow. Disaster movies have had a far and wide reach over the last 60 years since their first rise in popularity.
Yeah.
We've had stuff about every conceivable natural disaster you can imagine, as well as man-made disasters, from airplanes to skyscrapers to boats to roller coasters. So to find new ground would be an interesting one. They've even gone ahead, as we talked about before, they've gone ahead and pre-disaster space.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. They've set the stage quite nicely.
So something that hasn't been done before. Okay. All right.
This is a tough one, huh?
It's going to be dumb, but it's something I haven't seen before. A sinkhole starts,
Mm.
but it keeps growing and growing, and it doesn't show any signs of stopping
That could be a good one.
buildings start falling into it, like skyscrapers. Maybe it starts in a suburban neighborhood and it just keeps going and going and going, and there's nothing anybody can do to stop it.
Ooh.
So they got to figure out.
And at first, it's really slow.
Yes. And of course, scientists are warning them this thing is going to get bigger.
And they're like,
Yeah.
ha,
Ah. We
A
still have 5
sinkhole.
minutes.
Who cares? It's a sinkhole.
Scientists are liars. They don't know science.
Oh,
Global
God.
warming doesn't exist.
Actually,
Good reason.
that would actually work because they should do something where they're like, scientists are liars. And
Who
no one will
paid you for
listen.
that study, huh?
Uh-huh.
Definitely true.
All right, Betty, what's yours? What's your movie?
So, has anybody seen The Leftovers?
Yes.
No.
Okay,
I
so
love that. Actually, it's a great series.
okay, so you know the part where she goes into the other world, like they do all this thing and you're like wondering whether she's actually going to be able to go back into the other world or not. And she sees her family. That part,
Yep, I remember.
I think that would be a great idea for a movie. Because first of all, you don't know that they're getting there safely. You don't know how they friggin' the science out, and you don't know how she's gonna get back or how she did get back.
Hmm.
And so I think that would be a good idea in terms of making it a they could create a whole movie on that part alone.
Okay.
Because that
What
was a
about you,
good
Tori? That's actually a great idea. What about you, Tori? What's your idea?
I've been thinking since you said it, and I mean, I don't know. Maybe like a real life villain movie, like not a superhero movie, but like like kind of like Despicable Me, how they have that one villain and he
Mhm.
has also maybe something like that. I don't know. It's been kind of done before though. It's kind of hard to like
Which villain?
From Despicable Me.
yeah.
Oh,
He's
the main guy.
yeah, not Gru, but the guy that he's always um trying to defeat, the guy with the glasses. I don't know what his name was anyway.
The
I'm
only
way
one
off
I
topic.
saw was the one with his brother.
Yeah, the last one was it. Yeah, but they team up together to destroy that guy.
Oh, it's the same guy. Okay.
Yeah. So I don't know. Or maybe like something in the mountains. Not an avalanche, but and not like climbing Mount Everest, but something else in the mountains, like getting attacked by wolves or something.
Hmm.
Have you ever heard of that?
That could be
Heard of
good.
that movie where the girl goes to this woman goes to the mountains with some friends, and they go, they leave, they go to town, and then she tries to leave later, and she can't get out, and so she spends years in this cabin, and she can't go around the surface, and she can see things happening on the other side, but she can't get out.
Yeah.
That's
I you know
creepy.
what? we saw that last year, I think, on some streaming service.
That's terrifying.
That's actually, yeah, that is okay. My idea for a disaster movie is a little bit off the beaten path. I would like to see a disaster movie where we speculate on what would happen if there was a massive wildfire, massive, unlike anything we've ever seen before, and it took out all of the Amazon rainforest, every last acre. What happens to the planet at that point?
Yeah.
How do we survive, and what are the actual implications? Because it would be subtle, but it would be huge.
Mhm.
My dear friend Jack says that the number one disaster movie that he wants to see is he wakes up in a world where there is no coffee. And I actually kind of like that. That's actually kind of that we could definitely do a fun take on that.
That would be
But
cool.
the Amazon rainforest one to me is like, I've seen lots of movies about disasters in the rainforest, and I've seen lots of movies about, okay, well, here's some speculation about what would happen if like we lose this much of the, but what happens if we just lose it all? What happens to the whole
Mhm.
planet? Because
Yeah.
I think number one, we don't realize like what a huge thing that is. But number two, it also moves the stakes away from the actual disaster and makes us have to deal with the implication of the disaster in a way that is like we're removed from it. We didn't cause the fire. We didn't, but the fire, if we literally get rid of the world's cooling system, what happens to the world? I feel like that could be a great disaster movie.
That's
I do too. No, it's dope.
It's very real. Yeah,
I'm gonna have
actually,
nightmares. That's a horror movie.
it's a huge one. It's a huge one.
Yeah.
It's something that I've actually thought about as well. So next week on the movie Potluck, is going to be our last episode. Well, the last episode for this iteration of the movie Potluck.
Season finale.
And
finale.
We are going to be discussing scary, spooky movies. They don't have to be necessarily horror movies as much. We just spent the past couple of days celebrating solstice, so we've watched lots of like witchy movies that aren't necessarily scary, but they're fun. I really love them.
Like Hocus Pocus.
I
Like
was gonna
Hocus
say that
Pocus.
one.
We also watched Practical Magic, and we watched what's the name? What is the one?
The
I
Craft?
forgot the name of that one movie. No, we didn't watch The Craft. That's mean. God, those people are so mean. That gives me actual high school flashbacks.
Bruce Campbell is hot though.
Yeah, God, I wish I want to like that movie, but I swear to God, I get just this like creepy
No, she's
sense
not.
of I don't want to be picked on anymore. No, thank you.
Oh.
If I had known magic, I probably would have been a lot better off. But no, I didn't know magic, so I don't actually know magic now either. But anyway, that's a topic for another time.
Like, oh no, not then, no, now.
You implicated yourself when you said I was expecting you to be like, but I practice magic now, you know.
I dabble a little bit on the
You
side.
dabble,
Yeah. In any event, that's going to be our next podcast. So I'm sure it's going to be fun, and we will segue a little bit in next week's episode toward what we're going to do next, which is our TV dinners. We're going to change the format up a little bit, and I'm going to give you guys some pre-selected questions at the beginning of each podcast, and it will be up to you to come up with hopefully super awesome answers. Because it's TV, I feel like we've got a lot of leeway. There's a lot that we can discuss. There are so many different series options and things like that. In the beginning, we're going to talk real sort of narrow, I shouldn't say narrow. We're going to talk really wide, and then we'll move to more narrow. Just as a quick heads up, the only series that we are going to discuss in depth in the next couple of weeks is going to be The Boys from Amazon Prime. So I don't know, Betty, have you seen The Boys? Have you seen The Boys, Betty?
But okay. I will look it up.
It's interesting. It may not be exactly what you want to watch. I don't know. You'll have to tell us what you think about maybe a couple episodes. But in any event, that's the one that we're going to do a deep dive into. Everything else is going to be pretty general. So I feel like you guys will have lots and lots to bring to the table. With that, Betty, how can we find you on social media? Tell us all about your TikTok.
Okay, so I am taking a 3-month break. I'm not making any more content from TikTok because they're doing they have asked for like white creators to not make any new material and to only either share. So Black, Indigenous, and people of color will be able to have basically a spotlight.
Awesome.
And so I have taken on the challenge. So, but you can still find me I'll still be reposting other people's stuff. And you can also find me on Instagram at Betty Chitty Bang Bang.
Okay. And what about you, Tori?
You can find me every Friday night for my podcast, The Infectious Geek. It's at 9 p.m. You can catch me on my Facebook page and my YouTube channel. Des and Tori's podcast is going to be starting next week. It's going to be on Thursday. Thursday before your podcast.
All right.
And then you can always catch me on Wednesday nights for the pilot season, where we interview when we talk about different different pilots from different TV series, and it's pretty fun. And the week coming up on Wednesday, we're doing Battlestar Galactica, so that's pretty awesome. I'm pretty stoked about that.
Yeah, I
um,
feel like we've been on hiatus for a bit.
yeah, and then let's see, anything else? Oh, Instagram Rush Tori and Facebook Tori Rush with Y, Tory.
All right.
All
And
right.
Josh, how can we find all of the awesomeness from you and well, I'll just let you say. Tell us all about your awesomeness.
Well, you can always start on Twitter at SkidComic. After that, go to wadcomedia.com for all of your links and other needs like that. By the way, there's merchandise for all of the Wadco Media shows, including this one, the movie Potluck. So if you feel like sporting some merchandise from the movie Potluck, by all means, go to wadcomedia.com, check out the merchandise link, and go ahead and get yourself a nice little movie Potluck shirt. And if you
Nice.
like hearing my voice, don't forget to also tune in every Friday night at 10 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. Pacific for the Wadcast, the Writers, Actor, Director podcast, where we talk about, well, those things that I said, plus all those other awesome jobs on a film set that make people's visions come to life. That's right. Even off a film set, because, given an opportunity, there are a lot of different professions I would like to interview on the show. Love to talk to a copyright lawyer, or we've already had agents on the show. We've had, you know what? I want a gaffer and a best boy. Bring me a best boy, and we will interview him. But that's the Wadcast every Friday night, 10 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. Pacific, right here on the Wadco Media Facebook page, which you can probably find links to on the Movie Potluck Facebook page. So if you're not following that, why? Why aren't you following that? Hit like.
We'll try to get you somebody from craft services as well.
I'll do that. Yeah,
I feel like that might be actually really important. I mean, the movie company crawls on its stomach, so that could definitely work. And you can find me at moviesandmeals.com. I want to thank Tori and Betty and Josh for hanging out with me today. Thank you so much. I am really looking forward to next week. I am sure that we all have a scary movie that we want to talk about, or something that is spooky or creepy or just generally fun in that vein. Like I said, doesn't need to be super scary, just needs to be spooky stuff.
Okay.
So I will look forward to the only thing that you can't bring to this movie potluck, and we didn't even talk about food, but the only thing you can't bring to this movie potluck is nobody is allowed to bring Halloween Town. Nope.
I wasn't gonna. I don't like that movie.
only because I am so oversaturated with that movie. I'm pretty sure that I have seen Halloween Town no less than 200 times. Yes.
Yeah, me too.
I had my preteen kids loved that movie. So, okay. So we will see you all next week. Thank you so much for being here, and we'll see you then.